Hello ladies and gentlemen, and today I should be talking to you guys about the evolution of the broadsword. Now when one thinks of the medieval broadsword, we normally believe it comes from the Vikings, of the Germanic people, that it is an undemanding type weapon, that it's more meant for a swinging and a savage type warfare. But in truth, the type of evolution of the broadsword doesn't begin with the Vikings, or the Germanic people, but actually evolves from the Celtic people of the Hallstatt culture. The Hallstatt culture was pretty much of a type of region that lives in modern-day Central Europe, and in doing so, this weapon that the Celts had first invented has no name, but it's pretty much known by its title as the Hallstatt sword, since this was mainly the type of sword used in the region. Its type of build of the mount on the hilt was mainly with the so-called Mexican pommel hilt, since the pommel looked somewhat like a sombrero, while the sword itself had more of a type of broadsword blade. This type of blade would have more of a cutting use than a thrusting use, but still would have actually been used as very extremely dangerous, especially enough that one was to be hit by this weapon. It was even stated that even a warrior that was even hit by this weapon, or even has felt the blow of the sword, even while wearing armor. The sword was extremely dangerous, and in doing so gave rise to new Celtic inventions, such as the later swords that would be used by the Celts of Gaul. The Celts of Gaul used a type of elongated sword. This sword, however, different comparison from the original Celtic Hallstatt sword, mainly because this type of sword was more longer and not made out of bronze. Being made out of iron, the sword itself had more of a type of form of blade that was pretty much used for both thrusting and cutting use. Many people do not understand, though, that even the Celts had even decorated their swords and scabbards, and including the hilts of their swords, with decorated gems and gold and bronze, able to awe their foe from afar. Celts had used these type of swords from the very evolution, and including by the time when Rome had arrived into the lands of Gaul. Now, it is speculated that the Celts had actually, as soon after the Romans had defeated the Celts had later on still kept their original Celtic swords. These swords would later be known as the spatas that would be used by the Roman army, especially by the Roman cavalry or Roman commanders, until their spata had replaced the gladius all entirely by the time of the late Roman Empire. By the fall of Rome, it was actually estimated that the Germanic Celtic people had actually used this form of the spatha. But as soon as the Franks had actually acquired this broadsword, they evolved it to more of the Viking type shape that we know. These type of swords that the Vikings had once used, though, were originally from the Franks of Germanic territories. The Germanic people had used many forms of spatas and later on evolved them to the broadswords that we would see from used by the Saxons, Franks, and including later on used by the Vikings. Many people do not understand, though, that by this point in time the broadsword had also evolved even more. In fact, in doing so, it even acquired a different form of different handle shapes and length, including up until the late time of the Dark Ages, sometime during around the time of the Norman invasion of England at the Battle of Hastings. The Normans had their own version of the broadsword that evolved from their original predecessors. These included from a type of regular round pommel, or including a Norwegian pommel, or as well including with a crossguard hilt that we would normally see used on Crusader swords. This type of design was still used up until the end of the Crusades, and pretty much was still seen as a great weapon. The broadsword was pretty much famous to be a single-handed use weapon, while still having that short type of weaponized look. What we also do know from the everlasting evolution of the broadsword is by the time it reached the very late medieval age. By this point in time, the broadsword had once again evolved, this time into a different type of sword. The sword had actually evolved into the type of sword the Landskata would use. If you do not understand the type of German mercenaries that would have been used by the many forms of countries, the German mercenaries would use this type of sword for secondary use, just in case they had actually managed to fight in formation, mainly used by pikemen. Landskata would actually use these type of broadsword-like weapons. These swords were famous pretty much from the evolution of the hilt to its very elongated, broad-like blade. The guard having a form of rounded guard in the process would not technically show the same form that we would normally see on a cross guard, but instead actually protect both the back and front end of the palm of the hand. This sword would later on evolve into different forms, but until it comes to the very late era of the broadsword, which we see a different type of sword, which is known as the basket-hilt broadsword, which would have been used by many countries such as France, Scotland, England, Ireland, Germany, and many other countries, later being used by Scotland for the very last time. The Scots, such as the Jacobites, or including many divisions of the Scottish divisions in the British military, had used these type of swords through and throughout history. What we do know about the broadsword, though, is still a mystery of how many other evolutions there were. Some people even estimate that the sword blade itself actually evolved through different timelines, such as from the Franks to the Saxons and Germans, or as well from the Vikings, and including from Celtic origins. What we do know that it first evolved from the Bronze Age of the Hallstatt culture, and this today we are still trying to find out much mysteries about the broadsword and its evolution. As well, guys, I will leave you links down below for types of broadswords that I believe you guys might actually find very intriguing to actually one day afford and buy for your own collection. As well, I will leave you a link down below as well for a video on the evolution of swords. As well, it will show them the Hallstatt sword that I will be explaining, that I have explained inside the video. But as well, guys, if you guys want me to cover any type of weapons in history, let me know in the comments below, and I will get right to it immediately. This has been Templar, and have a good day. Also, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe for more upcoming videos, and click that bell button so that way you can stay tuned for more. Very well, my fellow Templars.